Drivers, start your engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this week in racing and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, excuse me, joining me in the studio, Luis Torres and Richard Youden. How we doing, guys?
We're good, thank you. We're good.
Going pretty good.
How are you, Frank?
Caught a little tickle in my throat. Just went on the air. Hey, I've got me a cough drop, so don't worry, I don't have them COVIDs. Just my throat's just a little dry. But anyway, so this weekend we had the Grand Prix of the United States after a one-year layoff when Formula One didn't travel very much beyond Europe last year in the pandemic. So Formula One returned to Austin, Texas at the Circuit of the Americas to a wonderful crowd, 140,000 plus on race day. Estimated 400,000 over the 3 days, which is mind-boggling. And somebody speculated that may actually be a record for, the weekend attendance at a Formula One race. Now, I don't really know. I haven't researched that a lot. I mean, I've seen some crowds at Monza that look like Woodstock, but certainly very successful event from the point of view of attendance. Not to mention just the sights and the visuals and the ancillary events, the celebrities. You got I got such a kick out of seeing Shaquille O'Neal deliver the trophies, and when he's standing next to Max Verstappen is on the top step of the podium, and Shaq is standing ground level, and he's the same height. I mean, just the visual was amazing. But I a wonderful race, and the United States has had this on again, off again history in Formula One. Just in the modern era, the championship era, which began in 1950, the first thing they did was they made the Indianapolis 500 eligible for points for Formula One, and that lasted for 10 years. Obviously, it was never considered the U.S. Grand Prix or a Grand Prix at all because there was very little crossover. Very few of the European guys would come over and run the Indy 500, and very few of
Jim Clark and Graham Hill are the only two that I can think of any note, aren't they?
Yes, but this is after that period.
Okay.
We're talking from 1950 to 1960.
Okay.
If you won the Indy 500 from 1950 to 1960, you are counted as a Formula One race winner.
Yep, that is correct.
Although it was never considered a Grand Prix. But they finally, got it together to have an actual U.S. Grand Prix in the late 1950s. I think it was 58. And they went to Riverside. They did again the following year at Sebring, and back to Riverside. And then in 1961, they moved the race to Watkins Glen, where it remained for 20 years. And it was a very popular event. A lot of times it was the season ender. It was a site for a big party for all the drivers at season's end. Occasionally there was, maybe Canada or around in Japan will come after Watkins Glen, but there was always the big party at the Glen at the Seneca Lodge. And this is chronicled in the film Rush, if you'll see that, but it was a favorite of the fans, favorite of the drivers during that year. But as time wore on, and this is right through the era where there was a lot of concerns about circuit safety. And Watkins Glen was right there with suspect safety at the circuits. And when push come to shove, the amount of money they would have needed to put into that place after 1980 or 81 to kind of move forward was cost prohibitive. The owners were struggling a little bit financially. So from there, there was no U.S. Grand Prix again until 1989. But there were Formula One races in the United States because the official U.S. Grand Prix was only held at, Riverside and Sebring, Watkins Glen, and then in the 90s, Phoenix, then Indianapolis, and on to Austin. Now, because Formula One has that little rule that you can't have two races with the same name, the Long Beach Grand Prix ran 8 times beginning in 1975, and that was known as the United States Grand Prix /West. And then we had the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, that ran twice in the early 80s. That was a parking lot race in Vegas. 7 times Formula One ran in downtown Detroit. That was known as the Detroit Grand Prix. Before that, morphed into an IndyCar race and then moved away from downtown, and now presently resides on Belle Isle, although they're talking about moving it back downtown as an IndyCar race. And then the one-off Dallas Grand Prix, which if you've never read up on that or have seen any video from there, this is the race they should have canceled Friday morning when they got to the track. This is a race that never should have happened. Somebody's 115-degree ambient temperature in July in Texas. The track was breaking up the moment they put cars on there. I believe this is the same race also where Senna hit a wall in practice. And when he came back to the pit, he said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, the wall moved."
Yes.
And they said, "Oh, you're nuts. The wall didn't move." They thought he was joking, but the wall moved. That's how shabbily this thing was put together. Because Senna
hadn't somebody else hit it earlier and then they rebuilt it and moved it back and put it in the wrong place?
Yeah, Senna was so precise. Senna was so precise. He would memorize. He knew exactly where to turn, exactly where his breaking points were, and then he hit the wall. And he said, "Well, yeah, the wall's moved. It wasn't there last time I went on." So,
it's the kind of stuff they emphasize in photo meetings on street courses. That you don't put your props in there because there's the occasion or the case if they hit the wall, it could move.
Oh yeah.
So, but anyway, so Watkins Glen disappeared. Long Beach turned into a Formula One race. Those other races were short or turned into an IndyCar race. Detroit turned into an IndyCar race. Caesars Palace also, I think, ran IndyCars for a time or two.
I think it was only once, and that was in 07.
Yeah, Dallas was a mess. And then Phoenix was a street race. They ran 2 times. And then, there was another gap with no Formula One in the United States until we went to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where they built the infield road course just to host Formula One. And we ran there for a number of years, I think 7.
Yeah.
About 7 years.
2000 through to about 2008, wasn't it?
7 was it.
7 was it. Yeah. We had the Michelin debacle. And then the next year they gave everybody free tickets that had come to the race the prior year. And then another gap until they built a circuit in Austin, and it's been there since 2012. And, again, just an amazing event. It looks like Formula One is very secure and successful in the United States as of now, with them getting set to run at Miami next year as well. We'll see how we do there. That's another going to be a bit of a purpose-built, part purpose-built, part temporary parking lot course. But so Richard, now the race itself was also pretty darn good to watch. And you got the 2 guys that are fighting for this title, right there together on the track.
Yep.
So go ahead and take us through it.
It wasn't too shabby, was it? So on the Friday morning, it was a strange one. Friday morning, those Mercedes bolted out of the box in free practice 1. And I think they were almost a second ahead of the Red Bulls, and I was sort of thinking, oh boy, this is this could be a bit of a procession here, because Mercedes certainly have found some pace in the last couple of races with some, potential new engine maps and engine modes and these upgraded components that both Hamilton and Bottas have taken with their respective engine penalties. And I think, well, maybe they're starting to stretch their legs a little bit here and really sort of show what they're capable of. But it turns out that maybe there was 2 factors. Maybe firstly, Red Bull had their engines turned down a little bit. And as we found out later in the week, Mercedes felt that they were a little bit too aggressive with the setup on the car, especially with the rear suspension. Coda has a history of being a relatively bumpy circuit. I know it caused havoc when they had the MotoGP there earlier in the year, and obviously bumps for MotoGP are a little bit more significant than bumps to a single seater car. So, but it certainly did play an impact on it. We remember back to Sebastian Vettel having a suspension failure there a couple of years ago. So Mercedes appeared to have gone a little bit aggressive with their suspension setup, and they sort of dialed it back a little bit, which undoubtedly cost them time. And also Red Bull did find some time. And going into qualifying, it really was anybody's game, I think. And, we saw Sergio Perez had been strong all weekend, and he could have snatched pole there towards the end, but it ended up being Verstappen and Hamilton 1-2 with Bottas. I think he qualified fourth, but with an engine change, did drop down to ninth. So you had your two championship protagonists there on the front row, going into arguably one of the most demanding first corners on the calendar when it comes to overtaking opportunities. The pole positions on the outside of the corner. Second place guy starts on the inside line, which is always sort of confuses me a little bit. Although the outside is admittedly the racing line, which is in theory cleaner. I don't think that really causes an issue these days as much as it did in previous years. With not even the previous years, but 10, 15 years ago, the dirty line doesn't really exist on Formula 1 grids anymore. So maybe they need to look at it in the future and give a bit more of a benefit to the pole sitter there and put him on the inside line. But Hamilton got a great start. It was a little bit of a couple of tenths of a second faster on the reaction times compared to Verstappen, and managed to take the lead going into turn one. And they sort of had pretty broad shoulders and pushed their elbows out a little bit, but nothing crazy. And it was pretty clean, good, close, clean racing. Especially when you consider what we've seen at Monza and Silverstone earlier in the year. They were pretty well behaved, both of them. Verstappen could sit in that sort of 1 second window pretty comfortably. He was on the radio quite early there saying that he was quicker than Lewis, and he just needed some clean air. And Red Bull pulled the undercut. They pulled him in early, got him back out in some clean air, and was pretty damn impressive with some of those lap times he put in when he got onto the hard tire for the second stint. Lewis stayed out a few laps longer, and when he eventually pitted, that 2 second lead he had, or 1 second lead, dropped back to a 6 second deficit almost. And the tires were 2 or 3 laps newer, but he was never really able to gain. He gained a little bit, but then it sort of settled down into this status quo again for the middle period of the race, and then it sort of changed a little bit. I think again, Red Bull was scared not scared, but conscious of Hamilton pulling the undercut and pitting early. So they pitted early, which gave that Hamilton basically the only opportunity he had was to run longer and lose more ground, but come out towards the end of the race on fresher tyres. And that's exactly what played out. I think he was 8 or 9 laps later than Max in his stop there. And, he was able to gain about half a second lap, but you've got to give, a huge amount of credit to Verstappen. He managed his race and he managed his tyres incredibly well on that final stint. So much so that when Lewis got within a second and a half, 2 second, that, window with 4 or 5 laps to go, Max was able to control his pace and, control his power delivery into the key areas of the track that basically prevented Lewis from getting in the DRS zone. And even when he did, Max had got that, very, very aggressive exit off the slow speed corners onto the long back stretch there. And Lewis wasn't able to make a move. And it was a fantastic race. I mean, we talked about it on this show a number of times already this year. This season will go down in history, I think, in many, many ways. You have 2 generational talents. And that's no disrespect to anybody else on the grid right now, but Lewis and Max are head and shoulders above anybody else. They are generational talents, and they are pushing each other to levels that neither of them have ever driven. I mean, both, Formula One now does this driver of the day. Well, who was driver of the day there? Although, yes, Max won the race, Lewis didn't make a mistake. Max didn't make a mistake. Both of them drove flawlessly for 60 odd laps or whatever it was, nearly 60 laps.
Max really looked like he took a couple pages out of Hamilton's playbook there, because you could just see how we've been watching Max for a number of years now, but he's still rather young. He still doesn't have that first championship under his belt, but he's he just keeps, as he matures and he learns, and I'm sure all those times that Lewis beat him, he's he taking some notes and my gosh, when you look at the drive that both of them put on, that's championship caliber drive right there, both of them.
Hesitation. And the thing that was most striking to me was Sergio Perez was third, 40 seconds behind. Now Perez is a pretty, he was quick all weekend, and he had a few issues during the race. He lost his drinks bottle, which I know doesn't really sound much, but these guys need all that hydration and fluid. I mean, these are athletes, and they're sort of programmed, if you like, to those levels of precision when it comes to their fluid intakes. So it was an influence, and definitely he would have lost some performance by not having that fluid intake for a long period of the race. But still, to be 40 seconds down is a huge deficit. We're not talking about Formula One in the 1980s when only 3 cars finished on the lead lap. Normally the top 10 are covered by 40 seconds, not the top 2, not the top 3. So those guys, Lewis and Max are just pushing each other, and we are incredibly lucky to see and have those guys racing neck and neck week in, week out. We're blessed, we really are. I say in years to come, we'll look back on this season as a classic.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So speaking of Perez with the drink bottle, I just had to bring this up because somebody had posted a little meme, and I thought it was quite funny. But it's a picture of like Perez in-car camera, and then there's the big Heineken banner on the thing over the track that says, if you drive, don't drink, and they said poor guy had to look at this every lap. So I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's not the first time that Perez got third in that large of a gap. I look back to Bahrain 2014 while Hamilton and Rosberg were battling for all their lives in that epic classic duel. Perez was just like around the same margin as he finished yesterday on Sunday, 40 plus seconds.
He's like the machine, But I mean, back then he was in a force injury or whatever they were called.
No, for sure.
And now he's in equal machinery to Max, and it was. But again, and this is goodness me, this is no knock on Perez at all. To my mind, more than anything, it highlights the level that these two guys are at. They are on another. They are.
No, absolutely. Even on the
you
opening,
can't put it into words. It's incredible the level that they're driving at right now.
Yeah, like in the opening lap, it looked like one glimmer of hope. Perez was about to overtake Verstappen, and I felt like there was that immediate instinct.
He knew which way his bread's buttered, didn't he? He knew what to do there.
Yeah, he knew that immediate instinct. It's like if Hamilton's ahead of Max, then back off a bit and just stand there just in case they took themselves out.
Yeah, every several years you've got this great rivalry between two guys that are so good. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at Schumacher, right? He wasn't really challenged like Lewis is being challenged right now. But you go back to Prost and Senna was a great one. Stewart and Fittipaldi. Jim Clark and Graham Hill. Here are guys that push one another. And again, here we are seeing this in our lifetime in modern Formula One cars. And it's just, to your point, it's incredible to watch.
And as we mentioned the other week on the show, where, whoever loses this battle, is there any more left in them? Is there any, Lewis has often talked about, when Rosberg beat him, it took him to another level because he was so determined to improve. And of course, Rosberg retired and stuck his middle finger up at Lewis and said, screw you, you're not going to get a chance to beat me. is this going to be the same now? Does Lewis have another gear available to him? Does Max have another gear available to him? If they don't, whoever loses his championship, where does it leave them? I think Max has more. Obviously Lewis is relatively old. In the grand scheme of things, I think he's 36 now. So, does Lewis have the ability to go away from a potential defeat this year, and come back? Because it's not. At this level, it's not the physical fact of losing, it's the mental fact of losing as well, I think, which is so detrimental to these guys. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think, Lewis will come back stronger if he loses this one to Max. Lewis could still win this, but, Max has stretched his lead a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, incredible to watch, incredible event. And just, it has all the NASCAR guys scratching their heads. Why can't we put on an event like this? I think somebody said, is that because they come here once a year and we've got 38 shows?
I don't think it's got anything to do with that. I really don't.
I highly that.
There is nothing in a country this big. There is nothing to stop. Now, admittedly, you're probably not going to get 140,000 people at every Cup race. I get that part of it, but there's this. And I think it's NASCAR are trying too hard to do something that they're not anymore. They're trying to be the good old boys racing from the 1980s and 1990s. Which is great, but that's not what the sport is, and B, that's not what the fans want. Or the certain section, they're trying to pander to a certain section of the audience, which is disappearing. Now, Formula One did a recent fan survey, and they had over 150,000 responses to this. And it showed quite markedly that the fan base in Formula One is getting younger, which is great for the sport long term. Now, if you look at NASCAR, it's going the other way. Young people aren't coming into the sport because it's the same old thing week in, week out. I'm not saying nobody, that's the wrong word. But, on the whole, mile-and-a-half racing is not as entertaining as close combat street course racing. And,
I agree with you. It just,
And also, you got to consider the package is wore and other stuff has worn thin on a lot of people.
Yeah, the fans, but in all fairness, the fans don't care about that. The fans don't know what aero package a Cup car is running, what generation chassis it is.
No, it's true. It's more or less on the purists, the older people, rather than young.
It's very. I think you don't want to sound disrespectful to these people, but screw them. I hate to say it, but NASCAR needs to look after itself. And it needs to look around the world and see what other racing series are doing and see what other racing series are doing well. And you look at the uptick in attendances and TV viewership of IndyCar. That should start to tell you something. The concept of these, good old boy racing and the fighting in the pit lane afterwards and all that sort of stuff. Why do you not get? I'm sorry. It is all manipulated. Okay. Every single racing series in the world, pretty much, you never see some of the stuff going on in the pit lane that you do at a NASCAR race in terms of drivers fighting and finger pointing and all that sort of stuff. And it's got nothing to do with the drivers. It's all, it's like watching wrestling, which isn't really wrestling. It's all scripted.
Well, NASCAR has been compared to wrestling for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's characters.
Because it's it's an entertainment product, and they put that out there. But to your point, the generation that loves that,
they don't care anymore.
Becoming, you got the whole, all these younger people are interested with technology. They're interested with access other than watching on NBC.
Yeah.
So.
Look, what channel was the Formula One race on over the weekend?
It was on ABC. It was on
prime time. When I turn my TV on, that is the first channel I get. You know, that is number one on my list of TV channels. It's not because I watch it a lot. It's just that is, you know, one of the prime TV networks in the US. And NASCAR sort of on it exactly. It'd be interesting to see that actually, because, you know, the Formula One and NASCAR did compete with each other over the weekend. And I'm pretty certain I know which one have got the biggest viewer figures.
Yeah, both of them were on national TV.
No, the NASCAR race was on NBCSN.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was on NBCSN. But yeah, I mean, generally
this was
speaking,
the last one on NBCSN because now it's all NBC, and then USA takes over the NBCSN slot next year.
Yeah, NBCSN.
Right. Yeah, so, but yeah, to your point, I mean, yeah, most of your Formula One races in the States are on ESPN2. And they're also on at 8 in the morning. So, but they still draw.
But doesn't that tell you something about it though?
Yeah, they still draw good ratings.
Yeah, you get
sociable hours, you know, on ESPN or ESPN2 at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and then but when you have a primetime race, it's still drawing such huge crowds. And I actually had a couple of friends go that had never been to a Formula One race before, and they were like, oh my God, this thing is amazing. You know, they were blown away by it because it's a spectacle. You know, and I'm not saying that cup racing isn't impressive visually, because it is, but it doesn't make you sit up and go, wow. It doesn't have that wow factor anymore because there's so many other things out there that do have a wow factor that it's trying to compete with.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And to your point, this is why Indycar is gaining traction, you know, after years of being in the dumpster in the ratings. Indycar actually does have a bit of a wow factor compared to NASCAR or sports cars. You know, they're not quite at the level of Formula One, but you know, some of the shows that IndyCar puts on are pretty darn good. And even, you know, like if you look at Nashville, where the race was a little embarrassing, the event was a phenomenal success.
Yeah. But you see, so I'm just thinking, actually, it'd be interesting to get your guys' take on this. Maybe one of the problems with NASCAR is that it is stock car racing. You know, the whole concept of it is we want to sell cars, so we want to race cars that look like the cars we sell. But you look at Formula One, you look at IndyCar, you look at IMSA, for example, they'll look completely different. That wows people. You know, do people really want to see a Toyota Corolla racing against a Ford Fusion? Not really.
Not really, yeah. But I mean, that concept had its time.
Exactly.
You know,
but the old,
you know, when it went on Sunday, sell on Monday. But I mean, a stock car hasn't been stock since probably the 50s.
No,
or early 60s. Yeah, I mean, they're
as the quotation goes, there's nothing stock on a stock car.
No, of course not. No, of course not.
But certain things crack me up. Like, you know, we have decals of
headlights
and exhaust pipes. We have decals of exhaust pipes on the back of the car when you know the actual exhaust comes out the side. You have decals of door handles. You know, just it's a race car, making a race car. But there is a whole set of folks who long for the old days, and they long for the guys like you know, Dale Earnhardt and Richard Petty, and then they long for the stock and they long for but it's, you know, it had its time. It was great in its time, but NASCAR hasn't kept up with the times. And to their credit, I mean, they've tried to spice up the show with the playoffs. They've added several more road courses over the last couple of years, you know, and I think the next gen car is going to be more like a proper race car.
But so why, you know, let's go completely sort of left field here. Why didn't they just go down the IMSA model? Get rid of this concept of stock car racing. Just be done with it. Okay, you may piss off some of your audience, but geez, there's not much of an audience left to piss off, is there? So let's go completely new. Let's go for a carbon composite, you know, IMSA style car, and really push that these are racing cars. They're not, you know, then you know, really sort of do something different, revolutionary, because otherwise the sport's going to continue to to go by the wayside compared to, Formula One, IndyCar, and IMSA to a certain extent, because especially with the racing fans, because of what it is. Do you think that, 90% of the people in the grandstands would rather watch a car that looks like an IMSA car with good racing than a stock car with crap racing?
Or manufactured, or just like no passing despite how close they are.
Yeah, do something. I think if this next gen car doesn't, take off hopefully it never takes off, you know what I mean? But, in the next couple of years, really sort of start to create really, really good racing, I think they've got to look at something different. And, the LMP cars, they are phenomenal race cars. They really are. In some ways, they're faster than IndyCar in many set of circumstances. So, and they race around Daytona on 3/4 of the oval. There's nothing to say you couldn't race those on an oval. And let's just do something, because otherwise it's just going to continue to circle the drain, and eventually it's going to get sucked down it.
Yeah, like prior to the Gen 6, as far as I know it's mostly the nose more than anything. The last time they looked anything like what you saw in the street was when they downsized the cars in the 80s. That's 40 years ago.
Yeah. And it just doesn't matter. It really,
the chassis has been almost the same for about half a century until now.
Yeah, the suspension, the truck arm suspension at the rear was from a 1950s Ford F-150. It's as old as the hills. Why? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Do something. Don't they sit there with the the governing bodies, at NASCAR sit there with their head in the sand, thinking, oh, we've got to make these cars look like street cars. Well, you know what? They're not kidding anybody. They're not street cars. So why try and pretend something and just go completely off the grid and do something, because it's not going to make it any worse than it is now. I'll tell you that much.
All right. Thank you for the rant, Richard. Always appreciate a good Richard Youden rant. But yeah. So to your point, we did have a NASCAR race this weekend. And it was
a segue there. There we go.
Yeah. So 3 in a row for Kyle Larson. He is just dude's on fire. He's unbeatable. So he's prevented anybody else from locking themselves into chase or into the finale. As we head to Martinsville, which will be a very interesting race. You're going to see a lot of guys just trying to clamor for those last 3 spots behind Larson. And Larson's probably no slouch in Martinsville either. The dude's kind of shown us he could win about anywhere. I don't think he's got a Martinsville win to his credit. But
no, not yet.
The way he's running, it doesn't surprise me. So, so who's below the cut right now, Luis?
At the moment, it is Ryan Blaney -1 because he had issues towards the end of the race where let's just say this, how I would best describe it. Stage 1, half the field had problems at stage 1 alone. Then you had like Ryan Blaney, who ultimately failed to finish. He went from 23 to the good to now -1 going to Martinsville. Kyle Busch had hit the wall with a flat tire. He somehow managed to get through. He had no competition towards the very end. He was 4 or 5 laps down. He had a miserable day, which is kind of usual for Kyle Busch at Kansas, except for the couple times he did win, including in the spring. You also, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, and Martin Truex Jr. are behind. Simply put, all the Penske's and Martin Truex Jr. Logano cut the gap in half, but it's still nowhere near enough to get him in an ideal spot to make the championship for. He has to win, period.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's safe other than Larson.
Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott are over 30 points. Should they have to finish in the top 15, and they're in the clear no matter what. And stage points are not even factored into this.
Yeah.
So they can have a so-so night, but as long as they're in the top 15, they're safe. They're like the semi-safe drivers right now. But everybody else, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, finishing the top 15 in Martinsville is a tall order, too. We're talking about a track with a lot of beating and banging, So you can't. You've got a gun for the win.
Yeah, at this point, it's pretty much win or nothing for all the Penske drivers, and essentially the Gibbs competitors not named Denny Hamlin.
The Gibbs guy's not named Denny Hamlin. So, all right. So, well, that's is that a night race? You said.
That is indeed a night race. The Xfinity 500 will end at night, so it's gonna be quite a race for sure. Yes, it's gonna be pushing it when it comes to Sunday Night Football. Hopefully, weather permit looks a little bit good, and hopefully, there's no weather problems like at Kansas where they had a 15-minute red flag, and all of that, and just hopefully it goes seamlessly. But you never. Typically, those fall races go seamlessly compared to the spring ones. So
but it's going to be cold down there on Saturday and Sunday evening.
Oh yes, it is. Yeah, I mean the last October race I went to in Martinsville was brutal. It was and then we were sitting on the side of the track where the wind was blowing right towards us. So yeah, it gets chilly in the mountains of Virginia in October. So all right, you guys care to pick a winner for Martinsville?
I feel like here's the thing about Larson. Their mindset is they're going to try to win out, which will, if they do, they'll have 11 wins to the season, which will equal him with Dale Earnhardt's 87 championship, but also David Pearson and Bill Elliott from 73 and 85. They won 11 each that year, but they didn't win the championship. Albeit Pearson was part-time. Elliott just had some reliability problems towards the end that Darrell Waltrip won it. But Larson had just a historic day. On top of the fact he won 3 in a row once again, which was the first since Dale Earnhardt in 87, to win 3 in a row on 2 separate occasions in 1 year. He's already surpassed Jeff Gordon for laps led in a season under the 36-race calendar that has been there for 20 years. But yeah, they're not slowing down anytime soon. And if they win at Martinsville or even Phoenix, he's going to become the first driver to win 10 or at least 10 races in a year since Jimmy Johnson in 07.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been a minute. Who's the last guy to win 4 in a row?
4 in a row was Jimmy Johnson in 2007.
There you go. All
but
right.
nobody, here's the thing, if he wins Martinsville and Phoenix, that'll be 5 in a row. That hasn't been done since Bobby Allison in 1971. And as far as modern era and national touring as a whole, Ron Hornaday in the Truck Series, he won 5 in a row as well.
Yeah, Hornaday was untouchable in Truck Series for a while back in the day. All right, so with all that being said,
but Larson is not my pick.
Okay,
it's probably
okay. You teased me.
No, I'm just implying that they're in the mindset of winning out.
All right, what's your pick?
This one's going to be their pick. That's going to be their toughest one. My pick is going to be Truex.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a long answer to a simple question. But Louise, I love you, man.
No, I had to mention all that stuff. I know we're kind of like Kansas happened. We're moving on to the next one. I got to add some tidbits on Larson's performance.
I got you. Richard, who do you like for Martinsville?
I was going to say Truex, but let's go with Keselowski.
All right. So I will say I'm going to go with Kyle Busch. And so Xfinity was in action in Kansas as well, right? Austin, our friend Austin Cindric took the win.
No, it was Ty Gibbs who got his 4th win of the year and pretty much locked up Rookie of the Year on the Xfinity level over Josh Berry.
Okay, well, good for him. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe Austin Cindric was leading when I had to race on for a minute. So
yeah, he Gibbs and Cindric battled for a while. The big notable thing is that there was a racing incident involving Sam Mayer with Noah Gragson and Harrison Burton that eliminated both Burton and Gragson, and now they're in a must-win situation. And going into Martinsville, nobody is in the championship 4. So Allmendinger, Cindric could have a real bad day, and they could be out of the playoffs at the championship 4. So we'll be curious to see what happens that Saturday in the Xfinity race. The Truck Series, which is on Saturday, before the Xfinity race, it's on Saturday compared to last year being on a Friday night. Barring any issues, it's pretty much looking like all but locked up for those who are in the top 4 right now. All of them are in double-digit advantage. Because after what happened at Talladega, I honestly don't see any of the Truck Series championship picture changing at all, just because of what happened at Talladega and their gaps and the advantage they have over the ones outside looking in, unless they so win. And I don't really see that. At this moment, it's probably Sheldon Creed or John Hunter Nemechek's title to lose. There's no question about it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the trucks had almost like a month layoff in the middle of their playoffs, which I find that to be odd. Although
that's been their shtick, even but this time.
Yeah, I was gonna say I heard the speculation
at the end of the year.
Yeah, at the end of the year, they have a harder time getting a TV window. Once NFL starts, so they pick and choose what they can. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it seems like, while the other series are the playoffs should be boom, 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 one after the other.
And it used to be for trucks, but now it's not.
Which I think it's a horrible marketing tool.
Yeah, because their playoffs start in late August and they end in November, but they have so much of a gap. You go from Talladega to Mars, but that is a huge gap. It's like what it was back in the day, and it still kind of is. It is true, where they start the year at Daytona, they got no racing for 2 months, and they come back to Martinsville for round 2.
Well, I guess it is what it is. So, all right. So, Formula One next, Richard. We're going to
Mexico.
Is that this coming weekend?
I believe so. Yeah, and there's a little bit of trivia.
It's at Phoenix weekend, which when I found out it was.
Weeks. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So
I thought it was next week too. And I realized it's not. I was like, great. I won't be able to see the finale. I won't be able to see it should things go well at Phoenix on the immediate end.
Well, some trivia for you. Sergio Perez's hometown is closer to the Circuit of the Americas than it is the Mexican Grand Prix. So his home race is actually at Coda, technically. I
mean, if you listen to the crowd, that's all I heard. It was just his name.
Yeah, they were pretty.
And I don't know how Crofty fluffed the idea that because everybody's saying that's Sergio's dad. I thought I was Carlos Slim for whatever reason, because the telecast were mentioning Carlos Slim was like, you sure that's Carlos Slim? And then found out it was Sergio's dad, but the way he was acting looked like he won the thing.
Wow.
But I don't.
We'll give him a pass on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's
7th of November is Mexico. Then it's Mexico, Sao Paulo, Qatar, 3 weeks back to back. So it's going to be a pretty busy week for the guys flying from Mexico to Brazil to Qatar. But
that Brazil to Qatar, that's quite a flight.
Yeah,
Mexico
go the wrong way around, getting a day back.
Oh, there you go. Getting a day back.
Works that way, does it? But
yeah.
I mean, it works that way on the calendar, but not on your body. No.
All
right. So Michael Andretti's rumored buyout of Alfa Romeo is still depends on who you read. You got some people saying it's a done deal. Other people say it's hit a stumbling block, but there was no announcement at the United States Grand Prix. So
nor Colton Herta running an Alfa Romeo on a Friday.
Nope, we didn't see that either. So all that was pure speculation. How much legs it actually had, I don't know. But you've got a couple of just different sources reporting different things. So, but I think that this deal will eventually happen. Whether it happens for 2022, I don't know. I don't know if Michael needs more capital, but there are a few folks saying that the family is no longer shareholders in the team. So we'll just have to play that one by ear. But I think eventually this deal will go through, and because there's enough smoke, there's got to be a fire there. But speaking of
it's a little bit concerning that if somebody's turning around trying to and not put this in a negative light, if he's trying to scrape the cash together, then if you're trying to scrape the cash together to buy a Formula One team, you shouldn't be buying a Formula One team.
Probably not, because evidently there's like a 50 million a year after that has to go to the original owners or something.
Some weird.
Formula One's a rich man's game, and Michael Andretti has some money in the bank, but it's not like Gene Haas money
or Penske or Ganassi money
or Penske. Anyway, so speaking of IndyCar, we had a couple guys testing at Barber on Monday or earlier today, really. Of course, you won't hear this show till Thursday, but Ryan Hunter-Reay in the Ed Carpenter car which is the car currently occupied by Connor Daly. So Ryan Hunter-Reay is, out of a seat at Andretti, being evaluated by Ed Carpenter as a possible replacement for Connor. In my mind, that's an upgrade. I mean, my apologies to all you Colton Herta fans, or I'm not Colton Herta, Connor Daly fans that love this guy, but he's had a couple of full seasons here and there, and he really hasn't brought the goods. He's got about 3 good finishes in about 50, 60 starts. Ryan Hunter-Reay, conversely, is a season champion, Indy 500 winner. Yeah, he's towards the end of his career, or the later days of his career, but he got a lot of fire in him, and I think a change of venue will do him good. He tested quite well with the car. I didn't hear any comments from Carpenter or Hunter-Reay, but the other people present at the test were a certain Mr. Nico Hulkenburg, who was not so much being evaluated by the McLaren team for a seat, so much as he was evaluating IndyCar as a career option for himself. But he did over 100 laps at Barber, and he was a second off of the top times, and the top times were set by David Malukas, who was running the coin car. That's the guy who's...
What's his background? Yeah.
What's his background? He's Indy Lights. He's in Indy Lights right now. Yep.
Yeah,
he finished second to Kyle Kirkwood in Indy Lights. He's an American driver of Lithuanian descent. But yeah, the guy's pretty good. He did set the fastest time. Hunter-Reay was second fastest. The other guys there were Kyle Kirkwood and Devlin DeFrancesco, who traded back and forth, besting one another's times, and they were both in Andretti cars. The hot ticket is that DeFrancesco is taking over that number 29 car that is James Hinchcliffe's ride in 21. But Kirkwood, obviously, he has the Indy Lights scholarship money, which is supposed to guarantee him a minimum of 3 starts, including the Indy 500. Now, Kirkwood and DeFrancesco both drive for Michael Andretti in Indy Lights, and Michael would like to retain both these guys. He just doesn't have enough, full-time entries to do that unless he were to put a 5th full-time entry in there. But I don't see it happening. But Michael wants to retain Kirkwood. It's a bit of a struggle there. I think DeFrancesco actually has a little more money to bring to the table than Kirkwood's Indy Lights scholarship. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But Kirkwood could easily take his money to somebody else.
Could be Coyne, could be, well, not really Rahal now, because we got one new we got Lundgaard in one of those seats. That's the 30 that was driven previously by Takuma Sato.
Right, and Jack Harvey's in the 45. And obviously, you got to put your money on Graham Rahal for retaining his ride in the 15.
I think it's pretty much established that he's in the 15.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I'm just being silly.
Good.
But there's another seat or two out there that are a little bit up in the air. That
the 14 Foyt car, but that's been linked more to Tatiana Calderon. Obviously, Bourdais is going to run full-time IMSA next season.
Right.
And if he were to run a couple IndyCar schedules, he'll like it to be with Foyt.
Right. And of course, Yukos has signed Callum Ilott, but Yukos has also stated their intent to run a 2-car team next year. So Kirk would theoretically take his money over to Yukos.
Could happen,
Yep.
Or there's also, you got to think also McLaren, if they have the sponsorship money, they would like to go to 3 if that's an option as well.
And I got to wonder, I'm sure Hulkenburg can scrape together some, European sponsors to bring on board, or at least, attract some sponsors with his name. If he chooses that, that's what he'd like to do. Again, he's still playing a little coy, and he just wants to see if he likes the IndyCar. I want to see if I like this. but you know, it looked like he did pretty well. He was pretty smooth around the course. I think it'll suit his driving style well. You know, if you look at the other guys that have come over like Ericsson and Grosjean, I think Hulkenberg will fit right in and be competitive off the bat, particularly if he's in a McLaren car, because that team is, you know, got a pretty good track record right now.
No, for sure he'll finally get that major open wheel podium that eluded him horrifically in Formula One.
Horrifically.
Because he's never scored a podium, never got that podium in Formula One. In spite of having some tremendous runs in F1, and I still stand at before going to Red Bull, that was Perez's best teammate he got. Because obviously when he had Ocon, that was an absolute dumpster fire, and it was Stroll. It is what it was. It was what it was, but that's besides the point. But yeah, I'm hope if he joins IndyCar, I think the question will be, would he be keen to running the ovals? That'll be the big question, because if he runs the ovals, you're talking about a stacked rookie of the year battle for the 500 and also the season as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you look at, you know, because you're going to have obviously Callum Islet in there. Dave DeFrancesca, if he picks up that ride. If Hulkenberg comes in, he'll be a rookie. And Kirkwood, obviously, if he gets more than the 3 starts, he can contend for Rookie of the Year honors. But yeah, you got IndyCar 2022 is shaping up to be pretty fun.
No, absolutely, absolutely. It's just a question of just those final bits and pieces, because we're really coming down to the final bits and pieces and who, as far as the 2022 roster is concerned.
Yeah, and again, to your point, the Foyt and Carpenter cars are the 2 ones up in the air, and the Carpenter, you know, I don't
same with Coyne as well, because
Coyne's always up in the air, yeah. So.
Yeah, because that 18 team is pretty much more than likely going to have a completely different driver.
Yeah, I don't think Ed Jones will be back. I mean, you do have Santino Ferrucci is still out there, you know.
Gone a bit quiet there, hasn't it, that one lately?
Been a bit quiet, yeah. So, but he can be certainly. I mean, he's driven for Coyne. You know, prior, you know, he drove that 18 car prior to Ed Jones. He's been running some Xfinity. He may want to take his whole career there, but I think he enjoys IndyCar, especially the ovals, especially the 500 where he's performed well. So, I mean, he's a guy that you got to look at. Takuma Sato was still, you know, kind of has no solid plans that we know of. But I was wondering about the Carpenter car, and I'm wondering if the Air Force sponsorship is out the door, or if it's, because some folks have suggested that it's kind of linked to Connor Daly, but military sponsorships have a kind of an interesting history in racing. You know, you remember the National Guard? National Guard was everywhere for a while. You had a National Guard, you know, dragster, stock car, and IndyCar, right? And then all of a sudden they decided to, you know, through their meetings of whoever's in charge of the National Guard, they decided sports sponsorships were not their best avenue for recruiting, and they just pulled all that money at once. And this is after you had the famous court case between Panther Racing and Rahal Racing, saying they stole the National Guard sponsorship from us. And then the National Guard just pulled out and they said, all y'all keep it. And then suddenly the Air Force comes in on a part-time basis, and then on a full-time basis. And then the Space Force jumps on for, you know, a one-off. And I don't even know if we still have a Space Force, you know, or if they have a budget anymore due to changes in the administration. So I kind of wonder if, you know, administration changes at the top of the U.S. government would affect sports sponsorships coming from the Air Force. And I don't know if Ryan Hunter-Reay has some money to bring to the game. My guess is no. He may find a few minor sponsors here and there, but I'll bet that he could probably scrounge up more than Connor Daly. And
Yeah, well, it's just a matter. We'll see what happens because I know we talked about that if the Air Force decides to stick around with Ed Carpenter Racing and then they sign on with Ryan Hunter-Reay, it fits their criteria of having an American driver being represented in the sponsorship side of things.
well, certainly, and Ryan Hunter-Reay is the guy whose nickname is Captain America.
Yeah, it's like one of those. Yeah, you make that opportunity happen as best as possible. It writes itself from a marketing standpoint.
But you kind of got to wonder how the Air Force is, really wanting an American driver. But the National Guard was fine with Vitor Meira and Dan Weldon.
That is true.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, but I mean, Air Force and National Guard are two different branches of the military. So, and then the other thing that surprised me was when they announced Jack Harvey for the 45, because I had read a couple of different published reports that Hy-Vee, one of their stipulations, what they had that they needed an American driver in that car, which is kind of why I was thinking, Askew or Ferrucci, and that Harvey would be in the 30. Now all of a sudden Harvey's in the Hy-Vee car and Lundgaard's in the, in the 30. So I got to wonder, maybe they just tried to, hey, Jack Harvey. Yeah. They pawned him off as an American to Hy-Vee. He name sounds pretty American compared to Christian Lundgaard. I don't know. I'm just being goofy.
Yeah, probably. And it's just, let's not forget when Lundgaard drove the 45 at the road course in August, it was My Jack. It was not Hy-Vee on the car.
Right. And My Jack is the company that is owned by Mike Lanigan.
Yeah. So
one of the team owners. Yeah. So yes, Hy-Vee didn't even, I guess, I think that's where the rumor started, that they really wanted nothing to do with a driver that was not an American. Although suddenly Jack Harvey's their boy.
Yeah, I think it's more or less of what they had planned and what they had in mind as far as number of races that were going to run. And then I guess the Lundgaard must have been just not on the cards. But they felt like they needed to get Lundgaard out there to see how he does. So they just scrapped up whatever they could as sponsorship just to decide to put My Jack under. I think that's what it really that's kind of where I stand on that.
Yeah,
more or less.
I agree. It surprised me that Hy-Vee wanted to, because I had contended all along that Hy-Vee, wanted to just kind of sponsor in their own market where they have supermarkets, and you wouldn't see them on West Coast, but they're all in for a full season. And again, Jack Harvey, despite the fact that he's not an American, is a highly marketable guy. He's very likable. He's very active on social media. He's a darn good qualifier. We just need to, if we get him a better race strategist, he'd probably be a race winner. So I think that it was probably easy sell to the Hy-Vee folks is, hey, this Harvey guy, he's the deal, man. You'll be happy with him, and I think they will be happy with him at the end of the day. I think this is a great opportunity for Jack Harvey.
No, absolutely, and I think it's a big season coming up for him because, for the lack of better terms, outside of Graham, he's basically trying to build that third car up to where they can be on par with Ray Hall and the 30 team, which would be Lundgaard, who too is going to try to keep the ball rolling of that team, how Sato was able to do from 18 to 20 and a little bit of 21, but mostly 18 through 20 when he was able to win races. Sato.
Yeah, I think Sato won three or four races.
Yeah, he won in Portland 18, won Barber and Gateway 19.
And then Indianapolis. He won four races since, and Graham Rahal hadn't won a race since 15.
Since I think Texas.
It was a Texas race where him and Hinchcliffe crossed the line pretty close together.
Yeah, where they made a big deal how he celebrated prematurity, how that also affected aerodynamically, and had he done it a little bit earlier, he would have probably lost due to that aero because of his premature celebration, and like how it affects the handling of the car and all of that.
That sounds ridiculous. So
it kind of does.
Yeah. Anyway, so we are out of time. We'll have to see how all that plays out, but it'd be interesting to see. I was kind of wondering what Ryan Hunter-Reay had up his sleeve, and testing in the Carpenter car. that shows that he's got a couple irons in the fire. There's still some interest out there in him. I think he's still got a lot to give, and even if it's at the expense of Connor Daly, who may lose a ride, I'd be happy to see Ryan Hunter-Reay in the Carpenter car. But with that being said, we are out of time. So, Richard, final thought from you?
I think that we touched on this before, how we've got to savor these last 5 races in Formula One, starting Mexico in a couple of weeks, and really embrace what we have in front of us as the rest of the racing calendar sort of wind down around the world. Give hopefully a chance for Formula One to stand apart, and we can enjoy 5 more races to the standard that we saw in Austin this last weekend.
That would be fantastic. Now, Louise, final thought from you?
I think, honestly, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, this F1 championship is far more compelling than what we're seeing on the 3 national touring divisions right now. But in NASCAR, and because you have, like we talked about, generational talent, but I will say this. Max winning a COTA might have been the step to where he's getting to that championship that he's been overdue for. If he delivers big in Mexico and Brazil, you probably can write the championship in favor of Max, big time.
I certainly feel like Austin was a tremendous confidence builder for Max coming out of there. He's only holding off probably the best guy in Formula One ever, judging by his record alone. Mm-hmm. But yeah, fantastic drive from both those guys. But yeah, we're out of time. So I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Podcasts. And I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank you, Louise. But most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us every week. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.